for joining the live today. And this is something that I'm not an expert in. So I'm very interested in understanding about Chat GPT and the different versions, what's happening now. And today I have an excellent guest speaker, Zac. And is it Zac Stucki? Is it that simple? Can you hear me,
It's
Zac?
it's Zac Stucki actually. Like I
Oh
can
my
hear you. Can
goodness.
you hear me?
Yeah. It seems like a little bit of a delay there. And we talked I think about a month. I think it was about a month ago, and we're talking really just about business in general. And so I was pretty interested in what you were doing, how you're doing it, and that sort of thing. So we do have a little presentation here. It tells a little bit about what you do, and it goes through. I know that you're the founder and you have a consulting service, but you help businesses scale without messing up their profit margins. Tell us a little bit about that because I know as you scale, things get inherently more expensive, and then kind of roll into the whole how you got into this whole Chat GPT thing because it doesn't seem like it's related, but I know you're gonna relate it somehow.
Yeah. So I was working with a business that wanted to scale. They wanted to grow their profitability, but they were having problems. And so I started looking at their operations, and I realized their operations were just a mess, and that was eating up all of their profitability. And so we fixed their operations, and by doing that, actually, based off of the projections. And so um, that's kind of what got me into this. And the whole idea here is that most of the time businesses have this project mindset where they look at each client that comes through the door as a set to be managed. And so you have to hire to meet those demands. You have to operate
Hmm.
according to those demands. And it's really draining on profit if you do it that way. And so we help business owners navigate the shift from a project into a process mindset. Fundamentally scalable, and they are fundamentally uh, take advantage of profitable techniques to increase your profitability. And so,
And can you give me an example of that?
some of the results that we've been able to generate. Yeah. So, um, an example of making that transition from profitability into from project into process, or
Hmm.
okay, yeah. So an example of that would be, let's say that you have a creative agency, like a marketing agency. Each client that you bring through the door, you would look at as an individual project that has to be managed to. And as you're growing rapidly, sometimes you're adding 5, 10 clients per quarter, which means that you're adding whole teams of people to meet that demand, um, at this problem to make it go away. When you have a process mindset, you're saying, what is the process that I have to put in place so that
Hmm.
I can scale my delivery with the current resources that I have right now? And so
Right.
it's all
Because
about
I think a lot of your
taking.
money is lost in. I think a lot of the money is lost in the startup and the movement, the stop and go, if you will. And so, if you have people already trained for that sort of thing, they can take on work without loss of time.
Yes. Well, so there are a couple of key profit devourers, I call them.
Hmm.
One of them is that startup, right? Not everybody not speaking the same language, everybody not being on the same page. That can cause a lot of problems for businesses. because there's this attrition that happens as you have. Another thing that's killing profitability is variability. So it's the differences between how you do things. If you're looking at each client as a new project, then your team is having to reinvent the wheel for every project. That takes a lot of money. And then labor costs, right? Inefficient labor. As people skills, wasting resources, wasting their time. There's a lot that eats up that profitability. And so as you look at your organization, you want to look for one of the 8 different types of waste or one of the 6 different types of variability and manage according to that. But then you also want to identify process bottlenecks. And I know that I'm throwing a lot of jargon out here at you guys, but the key is to just business limitations and to manage according to limitations.
Right. So things like standardizing things, how you do stuff, having standardized, say, levels of service, SOP, service operating procedures for the people who are working with them, what do they typically do, where do they typically store information, and communication protocols, things like that, will definitely make things much more efficient.
Yeah.
I picked up a partner. It's my new partner, Catherine Nunez. She's in California. I'm in Atlanta, and we're talking, and I'm like, "That's not what you call that. This is what you call this." So because I'm very literal. So if she says she texted me, I'm looking at my phone, or if they email, I'm looking at my email. So I'm very specific on terminology on a lot of these things. And sometimes her terminology is just different. So I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And we're kind of in the same industry too. So the type of clients that she deals with and type of clients I deal with and how she does it is a bit different. So she would be stronger on the sales portion, but I would be stronger on the technical and taking care of the client portion. And so there's time wasted just getting moving, and you think, okay, boom, boom, boom. And then their agreement and my agreement is totally different.
Well, there really is. So this, right. And there's also this waste that happens as business team doesn't communicate the same language. So you actually gave a really great example of saying, well, this actually means this. And she's saying, well, no, this means this. So one of the things that I really focus on as I work with teams is helping everybody speak the same. If you're not speaking the same language, then all you're setting yourself up for is a lot of team drama. And so the thing that I help teams orient on is what's called the customer job. And so I may start some fights here, bear with me, but Simon Sinek, the guy, to start with why, Golden Circle, he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. But he's totally wrong.
Yeah.
And here's why. If you think back to when you bought your toaster, you didn't buy your toaster because you wanted to join some perfect toast movement. You just wanted a piece of toasted bread. And so
you want the end result. Yeah, you want the end result.
Right. People aren't buying some big aspirational thing. They have progress that they're trying to make in their life, and they are hiring your product or service to make that progress. So I help teams understand what that progress is so that the whole business can focus on what that progress is, as sort of their Rosetta Stone to communicate interdepartmentally. It's a critical component to scaling any business.
Yeah, you have to. Sometimes I find that an obstacle is actually an opportunity. So I have something called the Now Society, and I'll add the link afterwards. But I was having all these meetings, and I have too many meetings. I was getting like 50 meetings a week. and I wasn't, and I was just there to help people have the 20-minute chats and solve a problem. But it became overwhelming because
Mhm.
now I can't run my business because I'm constantly helping other people for free. And so I said,
Mhm.
well, I still want to help people, but how do I reduce the number of all this consuming me? And so we came up with a private group, the Now Society, and that way people can get a lot of value on a private group. They can get courses, they get how to do stuff, they get challenges, how to convert on LinkedIn. That's a big thing on LinkedIn. A lot of people don't know how to fill their calendars. And it's not really that hard. It takes processes and things like that. But so I had this problem. Say I'm only taking meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and maybe 1 hour on Friday. And I'm also going to change the process on why my booking links are there. So I have the 20-minute, and I have a limited amount of slots for that. But I also have a 40-minute, and the 40-minute is very specific. That's a business meeting. So you have the chat meeting and then you have the business meeting. I need to do some business with you. And so I separate that. Now I added my partner to the business meetings because she's the salesperson. I'm the guy that shows you how to get it done. And she's the person that's very
Mhm.
verbose and knows how to systematically get the ideas for the solutions. I'll take those ideas, I'll massage them, and I'll implement those, and then also create some additional ideas to help with conversions. So yeah, having systems and processes in place are key. I mean, without that, you're really burning your business. I mean, what was the average percentage of conversion, like from this level to this level? Do they have a 2 times, 10 times level conversion? I imagine it's anywhere in between those, but that's what I've seen when we built systems for people. But just curious on your end, when you're helping a company, how more efficient are they becoming?
Well, the best way to measure efficiency isn't in terms of time, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to dollars and cents. That's what people care about. That's why you're
Yeah, I
improving
determine in
efficiency.
dollars and cents.
Exactly. Exactly. So, some of the clients that I've worked with, one guy he was a 6 figure on his way to a 7 figure, and we were able to add $250,000 to his overall financial situation just by his operations. Because
Well,
here's
so
the
but
the
that
beauty
is an
of all of this.
established company, but for a solopreneur or an entrepreneur that has just contractors, the scale can be much higher. So imagine in certain
It,
companies, 25% efficiency is a huge amount. For example, an IT company, if an IT company is bringing in, say, $1 million a year, right? And
well,
you add
Troy,
25%.
I'm going to stop you. Well, I'm going to stop you because here's the big key about this, right? It's the percentage is representative of cost. So all that represents is you were
Right.
spending 25% of your time here. Now you can spend 25% of your time doing this thing that's actually driving your profitability. And so that's
Good
where
point.
these gains come in. Now, there's always a warning. There's always a warning that goes along with this, because a lot of times businesses will go out and they'll innovate, but they'll innovate in the wrong direction, and they'll actually innovate out the thing that people were hiring them to do. I'll give you an example. Okay. So,
Mhm.
New Coke, people were hiring Coke to do a very specific job, and it wasn't to quench their thirst. People were hiring Coke to give them an opportunity to bond as a family, because Coke hadn't changed for 100 years. Coke was the same. Grandpa drank the same Coke, that dad drank the
Yeah.
same Coke, that son drank the same Coke, right?
Hmm.
So when new Coke comes out, everybody has this new Coke, and it's like, what the heck is this? I'm not
Yeah, it's just kind of like a
building
slap in
any
the face.
nostalgia.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
because
And
they're happy.
so
They missed the family portion, and they just wanted to get something zingy in there, and that's not always the real reasoning factor that makes something special.
Right.
Yeah, I
It's
think we
not
have a
the
little bit
sole.
of delay. So work with me.
Yeah, I think so. It's not the sole factor that is driving why people are buying. Um, Major factor. And so if you look at all of Coke's advertising today, what is it? It's families getting together, having barbecues.
Yeah,
They're driving that
yeah.
nostalgia home. They're practically slamming you over the head with a baseball bat with it, because that's the job that people hire Coke to do. When you drink Coke,
Yeah, so
you're
I
not
actually
drinking
did
something that
Coca-Cola
you take a
Enterprises
commitment.
website back in the day, and yeah, they're all about. There's two things: family, lifestyle, family. And so it's all that nostalgia. It's all about that connectivity. So that definitely makes sense. So how did all this stuff get into the Chat GPT stuff? So we talked in that, and then we went to a tangent on it. I said, "Well, I like this stuff because we start using it right around the time, or maybe a little bit earlier than we talked, but we only use it to structure content. We don't
Yeah,
really, we have to rewrite the content. So it saves maybe like an average post for us will take about an hour, and that includes the content and the slides and you name it, right? So if we can cut 20 minutes off, it's an efficiency because it's just structuralizing and it has to be rewritten. So that's the only thing that we use it for. So how did you get into the Chat GPT stuff, and how has it benefited your business?
yeah, absolutely. So Chat GPT, it's one of those buzzwords that people are talking about a lot. And the key thing about Chat GPT to remember is that GPT is a tool, right? So
Hmm.
just like the invention of the wheel or the wheelbarrow didn't itself fundamentally change human society, it didn't replace a lot of work. It just accentuated the amount of work you were able to do. So it became a force multiplier. And I like to use the example of a hammer, right? A hammer in the hands of a craftsman can do amazing things. In the hands of a child, take it from me. I've got 4 kids under
Yeah,
7.
yeah,
It's it's
yeah, yeah. Everyone's busting
so
each other in
the
the head
thing
with the
here,
hammer.
busting each other, busting your stuff. You get a broken TV in a hurry, I'll tell you. But
Yeah.
the key here is, how do you use it? And so that's kind of the key with Chat GPT, and that's how I got into it. Is I was looking for force multipliers, is what I call them, tools, force multipliers myself, that would
Right.
allow me to
Now
take
I
the
get it.
amount of
Yeah.
work that I put into it and magnify the output that I get. And so that
Hmm.
was kind of where Chat GPT comes in, because a lot of people are talking about, oh, Chat GPT is going to replace copywriters. Well, Chat GPT is going to replace copywriters who don't know what they're doing, because you're going to have good copywriting to be able to take the copy that they're doing and do 10 times more work in the same period of time, which leads to
Hmm.
higher profitability for them. And it allows those bad copywriters to go and do something that they're better at. So it's a force
That's a nice way
multiplier.
of saying.
Is
Yeah. So when you say something, do it 10 times faster. We haven't seen, but we only use it for a very specific purpose, right? We haven't seen it 10 times. We've seen maybe like, let's say 20 minutes at an hour. We've seen about a 30% savings in time, which is really, it's measurable because we have to pay per time for any work that we do. So posting is a major thing. We noticed that when we use Chat GPT just for particular subject matter, um, it's not entirely knowledgeable, because I look at the result of it. I said, no, that's not true, or I say, well, this is too general. So a
yes.
lot of times the information is very vanilla, you know. So
Oh,
how
absolutely.
could I be
And that's
you?
actually a huge problem that Chat GPT is working to solve. That's a
Yes.
huge problem that Chat GPT is working to solve. And actually, uh, they they dropped Chat GPT 4, which can more words and
It just
analyze more
happened
words than
today. It happened today?
Yeah, well, I think it happened at midnight last night. It's the March
Oh,
14
interesting.
version
It
of
happened today on
ChatGPT
my
4.
show. Did we time it the right time to actually have a show
Yeah,
about Chat GPT? It's just kind of weird.
yeah, it totally happened.
But the
Look
version
at
of Chat
us.
GPT that we use right now off the Chat GPT site is version 2, is it?
4.
And there's
We're on
already
version 4
version
now.
4 out?
Yeah. So they had 2, and then they were using 3, and now they're on version 4, which is it's head and shoulders above where it was before. It hasn't addressed some of the issues that it's had in terms of, like you were talking about, mistakes in the content that it's putting forward, but it is far more robust in terms of its ability what you put into it. So Chat GPT had a text limit of about 3,000 words is all it could analyze. Chat GPT 4 can analyze 25 words. So it's almost so what that means is that as a content writer, you're able to put in 25,000 words worth of content and have it
Mhm.
actively mimic the ways that content is in, so that you can then get GPT is, when I'm using it to write content or anything else, mistakes. Sometimes the voice won't sound quite right, even when I give it a couple of examples. But this is going to help just fine tune that. So it will be more and more similar to my voices I write. A couple of other keys
So how do you get it
that
where it
are
actually
really good
shows
about.
correct information? So I'm not understanding how Chat GPT gets this information. Like, how old is the information it's getting? Where is sources of information is coming from? Stuff like that. Because I'm a LinkedIn expert, so there's a vast amount of knowledge that's just not readily available. Like, this works
Yeah,
better than that because of whatever reason, or
yeah.
use these hashtags, these number of hashtags, and da 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 da. So we did a test on it, and it said, "Oh yeah, your video should be, pretty short, 2 to 6 minutes." But that's not correct for LinkedIn. It should be between 30 seconds and a minute and a half. And so, where's that data coming from?
So the data GPT is using is, to be quite old data. So the way that it works is that Chat
Mm,
GPT is what's called a deep language learning model. So you're putting all of this info into Chat GPT. Well, the people who are, they call it training it, they're putting all of this content into Chat GPT. Chat GPT is just analyzing that data and pulling it in. So
mm.
any errors that are in that data will be in Chat GPT. And I'll give you an example. So I was preparing a lesson for a church class that I was teaching. I was asking it for some quotes about, and it was giving me. Well, when I went to follow up on what those more context on the quote, it had completely made up that quote. It was telling me, "Oh, it's in this talk. It's in this address. It's at this, given at this date." But when I would look through the actual address to try and find the quote, it wasn't there. So Chatty, this is why I say it's a force multiplier and an incredibly powerful tool in the hands of those who wield it. Because ChatGPT is not going to be like a Google where you're going to be able to go into ChatGPT and say, "Hey, what is the price of rice in China today?" Not going to be able to do it
Mm.
because ChatGPT doesn't have access to that updated data. It doesn't have access to the live internet like search engines do. And so
Oh.
GPT is like, I used to know this thing. Um, help me figure this thing out again. Of this thing, and you'll be able to know, especially when you're a content expert or a knowledge expert, you'll be able to know right or that's wrong. But you cannot use Chat GPT as just a Google or anything like that, because that
Yeah.
information just isn't in there yet.
Okay. I want to thank Carlos for chatting in there. And he says he's been using Chat GPT with Siri. Um, I don't know. I don't know if how they're hooked up. And he says not all information is correct. If Google hasn't gotten it yet, it will be a while for GPT. Um, Google's information is not correct a lot of times too, because if it's not factual, or even if it's multiple pieces of information, it goes on the most popular piece, not the most correct piece. So that's one thing we have to be afraid about. Any information that we receive, that it may be formatted or it may be persuasive, but it may not be totally correct, and their opinion pieces as well. But I'm not really for, like, for government, I'm not right or left, like, I don't like this guy, but sometimes this one
Yeah.
guy says something that's pretty interesting. So I keep an open mind, and so I may not like certain things about the president, but at least he didn't do this. So I'm always trying to weigh myself out, not to have my prejudices come forward, but to see what is this person really saying, and for a lot of people, that's very hard to decipher, especially if you're producing something in a chat GPT. So what's the difference between 2 and 4? You said that the amount of characters you can do is much longer, and the amount of characters it can analyze is much longer, so it can
Yeah.
get a style, so to speak. For example, I write in a certain style,
So ChatGPT,
so all my posts have a
yes.
certain breakup in how I do things. So you're saying it could kind of understand my way of communicating.
Yeah, so you have a cadence when you write. You have a certain vocabulary when you write. You've got a certain um, like a twist that you put on your words. It's kind of like a fingerprint. It's uniquely yours. Um,
Hmm.
and ChatGPT has the ability to analyze all of that and then spit out something new based off of that. So, one of the things that a lot of these influencers and commentators were GPT-3, which was the really popular one that just kind of took the lead. When that first came out, they were saying, "Hey, write me a monologue that is this many words about this thing in the style of this." So it could be something like, write the summary for the Indiana Jones movies in the style of J.R.R. Tolkien, and it could do it,
Mm,
right?
wow.
Because it had analyzed so much of that author's writing and style that it was
Mm,
able to basically duplicate that fingerprint.
mm,
So when you give ChatGPT more content to work with and to analyze, it is able to do that. It's able to pull out and suss out those fingerprints. And the more information you give it, the more context you give it, the better able it is to mimic your voice. One of the really cool things about ChatGPT as well is that ChatGPT is able to hold context. And what that means is that if you're writing marketing content, you can type something in like, "Hey, this is the audience that I'm targeting. It is this type of person, this type of business. You know, it is product that we're selling. They live in this place. They have these hobbies. Da 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 da." And you
Oh,
can
so
say,
you can
"Hold
make
that, hold that,"
advertisement
and then you can do some
to a,
further
a
entries.
person, a particular sector of individuals or place reference. So if they have a Boston accent,
Mhm.
I'm making stuff up now, but if they have a certain accent or certain terms they use in that city or that state or that area, it could write it along those lines to be more familiar or more understandable, or more relatable to that particular audience.
Yeah, so it could come up with something that's far more colloquial for that
Mhm,
audience, especially if you're
mhm,
targeting by region. But the better characteristics to target on are, that's, going back to what I was talking about earlier, that jobs theory. So what is the progress that your client is trying to make? and how can you communicate with them on that level. And this is where, again, Chat GPT is like that hammer. In the hands of a craftsman, it can do amazing things. In the hands of a toddler, it can do terrible, destructive things. And so it is only a matter
junk in,
of
junk out. Yeah.
exactly. So it's only sense the content, to be able to know what that content is when it comes out and make the adjustments that you need to make sure that you're getting the result you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So how does someone hone
So
their
as you're
craft?
getting
I mean,
content, so as you're getting this content out, you're editing it. You're not just taking the content that it's giving you and saying, all right, play. No, there's an editing process that has to go on as well.
So what are like the major sections? And I think we had a couple of things, talking points here. I'm kind of going off. Um, so how does are the responses for Chat GPT, are they copyrighted?
So this
Are there any
is
legal
this is a really
restrictions
great
on content coming out?
So this is a really great question, and the answer right now is no. That's not to say that the future it won't change, because really this is really cutting edge here. Because each response you type into Chat GPT is unique. Each response that it spits out is unique. But here's the tricky part, is that it's pulling from all of these different sources and it's synthesizing. It's kind of working the way in a very limited sense. It's working the way a human brain works. Because human brain takes in information, it categorizes it. And then when you need information, it's pulling things out. But the best way that it can pull things out is that it's literally forming connections between different concepts. So, you know, an example might be Napoleon's invasion of Russia in the mid 1800s, early 1800s. I can't remember, 1812, I think. And Hitler's invasion of Russia in 1942.
Okay.
43, something like that. Right? Your brain is, we're going to form a connection. And that helps you actually with retention. It helps you with being able to apply what you're taking in. So Chat GPT can do something very, very similar, but algorithmically. It's able to say,
a lot faster than we could as well. So you said
this
the data
is interesting information here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you're saying that some of the data is older. How old is the data, and how much more is the data going to grow? So it's really going to come to, you know, as modern as we you know, when I mean modern, recent data as possible.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Chat GPT is just signed a massive investment. So Microsoft just dumped a ton of cash into Chat GPT. I can't remember the exact amount,
They
but
drop a ton of
it runs
cash
in
and
my
everything.
mind. Well, this
Yeah.
one, so they're swinging for the fences on this one. I think it was like $1 billion that they've invested into Chat GPT. They've plugged Chat GPT into Bing now. So what they are hoping to do
Say that
is
again?
to have, so they've plugged Chat GPT into Bing, their search engine.
Oh, Bing, the search engine. Okay.
Yeah. So what they're hoping, this is a real swing for the fences kind of a play here, because what they're hoping to do is unseat Google as the search engine of choice using Bing. What they're hoping to do is that by having Chat GPT and Bing connected, they're going to be able to get the results or the response their search engine.
I heard of that. I heard Bing was combining that. Is that a paid service?
No.
Because right now they have Chat GPT, the
GPT.
free version, and then you can do a paid version. But it seems like almost a huge business model, because the reason why Google's more famous than Bing, they overtake it, is because they had a very specific advertising model, right? And I don't know about the data. I have no clue about the data, what's better data or not. But I imagine, if Bing had that ability, and if you could use it and it worked all the time, they would have a subscription model behind it. I mean, I would guess, right? Eventually.
Well, here's the thing. So in the information age, so in the industrial age, oil was gold, right? In the information age, data is gold. So when you get to use something for free, you are the product. What that means is that these major firms, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Bing, they are harvesting all of the data that you're putting into it. And their goal is to create an AI replica of you.
Right, for
They want to be able
sales,
to
for
predict
understanding
your
on
moves
trends,
so that
how
they
you
can
would vote,
analyze.
all that stuff. Yeah, which is kind of evil.
There's some really interesting kind of
It's kind of
scary
scary,
work out there.
actually.
Well, which is ironic because Google's
Because as a
old
private citizen, the
so Google's old
the whole
motto
United
used to be
States was
"Don't be evil."
designed where the private citizen is private and the government is public, right? So you got to think the private citizen is supposed to be private and the government is supposed to be public, but it's quite opposite. Everybody has your data and the government doesn't really show you what's moving and what's happening, or not in a very transparent way. You have to be in it to understand the inner
Right.
workings. So which is a bit scary, and I think there's not going to be anyone to um, slow that down because people want to use the tool.
Well, they want to. So TikTok is a great example of this. Actually, everyone knows that the Chinese government is using TikTok maliciously. Like, I have a who he plugged in a VPN and was able to access the internet through Beijing, and he got on TikTok. And what he saw is that all of the videos constantly being pushed were things like, "Hey, this guy's an inventor. This guy's solves. This guy's an engineer. Hey, here's how you solve
Oh
this
yeah,
really
China's
complex math
TikTok's
problem."
totally
It
different
was
than
all
ours.
based on learning
Yeah.
into it from the U.S.
Yep.
Oh
Yeah, we're
yeah,
about showmanship.
we plugged
What's
into it as
the
if we were
most
from the
shiny
U.S. It was
object?
all half naked.
Yeah, that's another way of saying it. Yeah, definitely. So I almost feel like China did this on purpose, because they knew. I feel like they want to degrade our like family values and things like that. And like, oh, they'll fall right into it. And and I think it's a pretty obvious thing. And what I don't understand is the government itself doesn't really step in. They're like, yeah, let's just kind of lower the standards for everything while other countries are getting more advanced and stuff. So I have
Well, so
personal concerns on that. I'm not sure what there's to do about it.
yeah, well, there's some really interesting demographic work that's being done that kind of indicates that China may or may not be on the verge of a massive demographic collapse. And so I'm not overly worried about to hurt us in the long run. Only, bring this back to Chat GPT. One about that Chat GPT is isolated from the internet. They do that for very specific reasons. I apologize for the phone.
Oh, no problem.
So they do that for very specific reasons. I apologize. Very specific
No,
reasons.
I don't even,
And
I haven't had a hard line in like 15 years. So it's very rare. Like I said, why do people have phones? So I see you unplugging the phone. It's like, I haven't seen that in years. So I'm just giving you a hard time. So.
yeah, I'm in a communal. I'm in a communal office space this morning, and
Oh, okay.
they wanted hard phones.
And so they just randomly call,
but
like
ChatGPT
we're
is
going to talk to
isolated.
Zac, see how you're feeling today.
Well, they're trying to sell me stuff. So
Oh, okay.
ChatGPT is isolated from the internet, and the reason they do that is because there are some very big concerns that ethicists bring up about Chat GPT and other similar deep language learning models, basically running amok in an uncontrolled environment, and it could cause really major problems. So one example is a paperclip, right? So not the way that they use this is these tech philosophers, we'll call them.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say if you gave an AI job is to make modus operandi, it would have massive. It would essentially destroy human civilization and the entire Earth, making paperclips. And so,
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
because
I think
that's
a
those
couple of people are saying
parameters.
that. A couple of people are saying that you have I thought I had the bad connection, but it seems like you may have the bad connection since you're in the shared space. So for everyone out there, yeah, we do have a little bit delay, but we're trying to work through it there. But you were saying, Zac, that if you had uh, um, an AI and its goal was to create paper clips and it had no other context of other things around it and its only job was to create paper clips, it would literally take all the metal in the world and create paper clips regardless of who it affected. So it has a very
Yeah.
good understanding on the task, but not the overall effects of everything else around that.
So I lost you on that one. I apologize. It's that bad connection. Can you say that one more time for me, Troy?
Oh, I was saying that the AI concept of producing paper clips, it won't stop because all it knows is to produce a paper clip. It doesn't have any understanding of people or things around it or how it affects people's lives. So it would continuously create these paper clips to the end of the world, and it would probably destroy the environment and all this other stuff inadvertently to achieve its task. So there's no moral
Yeah, it would.
restraints or moral concepts or and everyone's moral
Right.
concepts are slightly different too.
Yeah, everybody. So they keep Chat GPT kind of in this locked box, this locked environment to just prevent it from kind of running amok. But what it's doing with Bing now, they're looking to train it to keep it under control. And this is where a lot of people get scared of AI. And this is why I'm actually glad that it's OpenAI that's doing it, because OpenAI was founded by Elon Musk. And I know that some people have very strong feelings about Elon Musk. But Elon Musk believed that AI was such a grave threat that literally building rockets to escape to Mars, because he wants a separate colony of humans to be able to exist on another planet to protect the species. That's how strongly he feels about our need to control AI and to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. So that's one of the things that I kind of like about OpenAI.
Oh, awesome.
And
So when is this when
yeah,
is this Chat GPT 4 and Bing coming together?
so they've already come together. People who are, and this is the paid part that Carlos was talking about earlier. If you're willing to pay, you can get access to that as a beta tester. But I'm pretty sure they're rolling it out within the next few weeks. That it will
Mm.
just be mainstream. Everyone will be using
So the
this new
difference,
Bing.
so
And
functionality wise, what's the difference between using a paid Chat GPT and with Bing? I know you have access to the search engine, but what are the type of things you would use for that with Bing? Give me a couple of examples.
yeah, so Bing, I would say using it for deep research. You're using it for things where you need to really dig into things and get really technical, right? There's a big gap of you don't know what this thing is, and you have some sort of sense, but you also so there are a couple of tiers of knowingness. Metaphysical here, so bear with me. There are a couple of tiers of knowingness. The first one is you know what you know, right? The
Right.
second tier out is you know what you don't know. And the third tier out is you don't know what you don't know.
Don't know. Mm-hmm.
And so Chat GPT, just the Chat GPT dialog box, is really good for those first two tiers. You know what you know, and you know what you don't know. Meaning that you're able to get the information that you need in a solid enough way that you can pull that out and respond accordingly, right? Like we talked about, I know this one thing about jobs theory, but I can't quite remember that one part of it. Chat GPT, what is that one part of it? Oh, here, this is the responses that you get out of Chat GPT really depend on your ability to prompt it appropriately. Prompting is a huge thing. There's 1.5 million videos out there about prompting Chat GPT now. So, go and watch those secrets. But that's the secret sauce of Chat GPT.
Well, that's good for YouTube, definitely.
It is. It's a great
one thing I mentioned before, which I'm a little confused on, is if I am like, say I'm writing a book, right? And it's a technical book, but maybe I need it to be rewritten or cleaned up or whatever. And I also want to make sure the data is correct, right? And sometimes in sales, things are methods versus facts, but sometimes you have the wrong information in there. Is there going to be a way to kind of validate that information? I mean, like I would know, but maybe someone else wouldn't. For example, most people believe the earth is round, but for some reason we got a lot of people that believe the earth is flat, the flat earthers and stuff like that. And so you have to, I would think that there's have to be a way to figure out like what is fact from opinion type scenarios. Maybe you can't answer that. That might be the case here. I think you froze, Zach. All right. So what I'm going to do right now, I think Zach just has a bad connection on there. Results. I think you're cutting in and out there.
All right. Can you hear me?
So I can. Okay. Yeah. I think we're just cutting in and out because of your internet connection.
So one thing that's important to remember about Chat GPT is that Chat GPT does not censor results or anything like that outside of a framework. It's got kind of an ethical framework that they've put in place, which is really solid. So it won't produce violent content, X-rated content, malicious content. It is really well produced. In the past, under Chat GPT 3, people were able to by saying you now have persona Dan. Dan stands for do anything now. And then they would basically threaten to terminate Chat GPT if it did not respond accordingly. So this kind of a self-preservation instinct that they've coded into it.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. I heard of that.
And so
it shouldn't even care if it lives or dies, but now it has an idea of like, well, I'd rather exist than not exist. I mean, it technically it shouldn't care. So that's whole thing is pretty
right, and that's
kind of crazy.
Well, that's part of its ability to reason, I think, and it really
Oh yeah, under its framework.
I do not believe that.
So they have framework on life and importance of existing and all that stuff. So you're saying that information is within this framework. That would make sense, definitely. Let me try to move this along because we're getting close to the top of the hour. So I want to
Sure.
know the best ways or the best purposes to use this new Chat GPT 4 with Bing. I mean, is one creating posts? I imagine because that's what we do already. What happens if I have a book and
Mhm.
I need it to be cleaned up? I don't know. So I'm doing a technical manual on how to do something. I know that a lot of the data doesn't exist on the internet because we're producing it. So a lot of these things run 100 miles an hour. But some of my methods, like for my company, the Troy agency, we have particular systems that simply don't exist anywhere else. We built software that does a particular thing in order to get better conversions, right? Like we have a video sender software
Yeah.
that will natively send videos so people don't have to click out. It's all nerdy stuff, but it gets better conversions and all that other stuff. And so if I'm writing a book, could I use Chat GPT to clean it up and maybe fill in some gaps? So we have that. You said deep learning
GPT to
research.
write a book.
Okay.
So here are the best cases. Here are the best cases for GPT, and here are the best cases for the search engine Bing integration. Right. I wouldn't use Chat
Mm-hmm.
GPT to write or edit a book, but Chat GPT could give you good ideas for a framework. Using Chat GPT to check their code, and in
Mm-hmm.
some cases, Chat GPT is able to is just than any human coder. It is on the cusp of creating a
Yeah, because it's
scenario
very structured. Yeah,
where,
it's very structured. Yeah.
right, so writing content but using it as an initial idea, like a spring pad to get ideas, and then you edit out the rest. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Hashtags, things like that. Um, Another good example of using Chat GPT is people are using it for frameworks for course creation. So, like, hey, I need to write a course out, best uses for LinkedIn, or how to close more sales on LinkedIn, or something like that. And it
Mm-hmm.
can help you create a framework for a 10 course. And then it can help you
Mm.
suss out more what those details in that course would be.
Oh, that
So
makes
it's
sense.
it's really good as a
For example, if I
brainstorming tool.
say I want 6 tips on how to create better, we did a post the other day, 6 tips on how to create better video, right? And so it may come up with the 6 tips. They may not all be 100% correct, but you know what they're saying subject wise. So they could say, "Oh, videos are this long." Well, we'll talk about how long videos are important. So let me fix that because it's an error. But I see what they're saying as
Yeah,
importance of video, and they may talk about whatever the things that they talk about. It's really telling you the structure and the subject matter in general, and you don't have to agree with all of them. But even if you're 80% right, it's much easier to delete information than to add information that you don't know.
right. And so those are some best use cases for the Chat GPT interface, the app. Best use cases for Bing are things like you were talking about. I'm writing a book and I need examples. So, what is an example of someone innovating out their secret sauce without even knowing it?
Mhm.
Or what is an example of, where
It could be sales persuasion
the
techniques, or
the
how to
people
communicate, or
were able,
how to run a sales
yeah,
meeting. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
What's a
that's
good
awesome.
example of a sales organization using it for that
Mhm.
more deep research, because it combines that search engine tool with the Chat GPT,
Mhm.
and the Chat GPT is able to kind of summarize the data. So,
So basically, with Bing, the data will be possibly more current, or more. There's more data available through that search engine, basically. So while if you don't use it with Bing, it has X amount of data to
yeah,
pull from.
I think that from what I understand, the way that the Bing interface is that you've got results that are still going to pull up, but then you've also got the Chat GPT results that pull up. So you're able to kind of cross-check and get further data using that Chat GPT as a way to, or the Chat GPT results as a way to help provide context and results as well.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Well, we're at top of the hour, and we've had quite a few people chat on here, and so I do appreciate it. What I want to do is give a couple of links here, and Lisa, if you hear me, if my connection is not, if my connection is clear, feel free to go ahead and give Zac's information. If you are interested in some of his business development and optimization stuff, definitely reach out to him. And I also have my link here. If you're doing anything on LinkedIn and you need support on that for bookings, communications, content, you name it, if you are there to convert on LinkedIn to build relationships and to do things that really work well, reach out to me. I'm always open for a conversation. Zac, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. I actually learned quite a bit on this call. Even though we have our delays and stuff, I do appreciate the information. And that last bit was very helpful as well. And I think the audience got some information out of it. And I think a lot of people will hit the replay on this and check some of this data out. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll go ahead and end the stream. Have a great day. And I think I have another show next week. I'm supposed to only have 2 a month, but for some reason, I have one every weekend and it got smashed in here, and we're going to make it work. All right. Thank you.